This is the Venture Capital Fast Lane. I am your host, Ryan Else, Managing Partner of Roadster Capital. In the Venture Capital Fast Lane, we will talk about all things fast in venture capital and everything that surrounds it. If it's fast, we're going to talk about it. Growth, exits, funding, cars, rockets, data, software, and much more. We are in the midst of the fourth industrial revolution, so buckle up. This is the Venture Capital Fast Lane. Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the Venture Capital Fast Lane. Today we're going to be speaking with Jason Palmer. Jason and I met in New York City through a mutual friend back in 2021. He and I were both presenting our VC funds to a room full of limited partners. I was sitting next to Jason that afternoon, and I was pleasantly surprised by how calm he was when his time came to address the room. He was well prepared. Jason Palmer is an entrepreneur, he is an impact investor, and he is a philanthropist running for President of the United States in 2024 as a Democratic candidate. He was born December 1st, 1971. That was yesterday. Happy birthday, Jason. He has served in executive and leadership positions at multiple organizations, including Microsoft, Kaplan Education, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and a leading impact investor, New Markets Venture Partners. He holds a B.A. in Interdisciplinary Studies from the University of Virginia, and he earned his M.B.A. from Harvard Business School. He is a proud resident of Baltimore, Maryland, and a devoted father. Jason, welcome to the Venture Capital Fast Lane.
Hey, Ryan, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so you are a candidate for President of the United States, and your campaign's website for everybody is palmerforpresident.us. What is the driving force behind your decision to enter the 2024 presidential race?
The number one reason is because, as I think everybody knows, the two leading candidates who are very likely to have a rematch are both, one's more than 80 years old, the other is approaching 80 years old. And we remember how that election was just a few years ago. It was sort of a shout fest. It was embarrassing to America on the world stage. And, I kept seeing poll after poll saying, if only someone younger could get into the race, maybe someone with a career in business, maybe someone with some innovation and new ideas. And it just, it was a drumbeat month after month after month. I kept expecting someone else would get in the race. Maybe Gretchen Whitmer, maybe, governor of California, maybe even someone who is a billionaire and has created multiple companies. Nobody got into the race. So finally I said, I'm an impact investor. I invest in entrepreneurs for a living. I used to be an entrepreneur myself. I've actually had some experience in government. I was on the Smithsonian's board for the Smithsonian National Zoo. Spent 12 years on the University of Virginia's board. Long ago, I actually worked for Senator Moynihan, who was a great senator from New York. And I said, you know what? I'm going to put my hat in the race, and I'm going to create a positive, optimistic vision for the future so that people know we actually can solve these problems that have been bedeviling our society for decades, and we don't have to wait 40 more years to get it done. That's why I decided to run for president.
I think that's a really great reason to do it. I mean, there are a lot of people who are out there just screaming from the rooftops. We need someone who is younger and a bit faster on their feet and capable of serving two terms fluidly, right?
Yep, exactly. It wasn't just a quick decision either. This was something I took multiple months to think about. My firm, New Markets Venture Partners, we just raised a $160 million fund. You were referring to a couple of years ago when we were busy raising money for that fund. This is not a decision I take lightly. I've taken a 6-month, at least, leave of absence from New Markets. And if the campaign goes well, that is going to go even longer and possibly 4 years or 8 years longer. And, this is something that I think our country needs. And I think I can bring that voice of young people, of entrepreneurs, of how we can actually change the system of how the United States of America works. And I do hope we get into that with some of the subsequent questions.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely get into that. So Tell me, how do you plan to leverage your background in finance to address economic challenges and foster sustainable growth for all Americans?
Okay, the number one way is something that you probably understand too, since we're in venture capital. So, 64% of the job creation in the country comes from small businesses. Now, a lot of times you'll hear on the news about large businesses and layoffs happening and, complicated changes in industries happening. But most people don't realize that almost all of the important quality job creation happens in small business and entrepreneurial businesses, which are the ones that we invest in. And so there's lots of things that can be done to reduce red tape for those companies, make it easier for them to get capital, make it easier for them to reinvest in their companies and grow quality jobs. And another aspect of this, which I'm sure you know about, is B corporations. So right now, most companies in America, more than 95, probably even 99%, are C corporations. C corporations are primarily focused on profit as their only objective, not even primary objective, only objective. However, as an impact investor, I've been spending my whole life investing in and starting what are called B corporations now. B corporations are benefit corporations. They have a dual purpose, both to make money and to achieve some positive societal mission. And they actually measure that mission and report it on a quarterly basis, like our companies at New Markets. And at this point, there are thousands and thousands of companies that have registered as B corporations, meaning that they have a double bottom line focus. They have a stakeholder capitalism approach that includes helping out the community, solving societal problems, actually, generating these quality jobs. And we can increase the number of those companies and we can restructure the tax system so that more and more and more companies want to be benefit corporations.
Yeah, the process of becoming a B Corp it's not as simple as checking a box. There are a lot of processes and questions that each company must go through in order to receive that accreditation, correct?
That is correct. Now, that's also something where we can streamline it. B corporations are not something that Jason Palmer invented. This is an idea that's now been around for about 15 years. And in fact, 40 states have B corporation laws. There's a need to have a national B corporation law that would be simplified and streamlined and make it easier for companies to qualify for that B corporation status. And if we make it so that there's one tax rate for B corporations and also small businesses, and another tax rate for larger companies, say companies with $1 billion in profit or more, then we can actually get our economy creating more of these small businesses, more of these B corporations, and growing more of those quality jobs. There actually is a way to do this that is calculable, proven, and can be scaled.
Yeah, and I think the nice thing about the way B Corp is structured is it's very straightforward. You know, there is a movement within business which is growing, and I'm really pleased to see it growing, which is integrated philanthropy and asking more of business.
Yeah,
So B Corp allows you to do that while having maybe a taxable benefit. There are other organizations out there that I think very highly of. I think the one that always comes to mind first, there's two. One is I think it's 1% for the planet.
mm-hmm.
Another one that comes to mind would without a doubt be Pledge 1%, which Benioff and his team started over
Yep,
at Salesforce.
yep,
And those are really strong programs with really good tool sets and guidelines that allow companies to be successful in the way that they give back and or integrate a 1-1-1 approach, time, profit, and however you want to define it within your org. But
absolutely,
this
absolutely. I want to
B
give an
group,
extra shout out to Mark Benioff and the work he's done at Salesforce and then with his other initiatives. There are now about 200 CEOs who are part of the 1,000 largest companies who also agree with this approach and want to move their companies in this direction. There was this whole charter on stakeholder capitalism that was signed by Jamie Dimon, Mark Benioff, and many others about 4 years ago in 2019, saying that they thought that America should move towards stakeholder capitalism. I call it conscious capitalism. But it is this approach of focusing on not just profits, but kind of multiple stakeholders, customers, community, employees, the environment. We can actually change our system to be focused on this stakeholder approach. I mean, it's so interesting. Even Bernie Sanders had a platform back when he was running that was about reinventing capitalism. And I went back and looked at it because I was like, is this, I feel like I remember this. Did it really happen? And yes, it did really happen. Even Bernie Sanders had his own plan to kind of reinvent capitalism. And it's not too far off of what I'm talking about and what these other leaders have been talking about. But enough about the talk. Let's actually implement it.
I completely agree. It's time to move forward and make this routine
Yes.
and simple, like you said earlier. Simple,
Yes.
simple.
Make it simple for companies to opt in. Make it simple to have a different tax rate for C corporations than B corporations, and make it even more easy for small businesses. There's an organization called The Right to Start that is out there gathering ground in multiple states as well to make it easier to start businesses, easier to get capital for businesses in the earliest stages. And I do think there should be no taxes at all on the first $1 million of profit that a company earns. And by the way, that's almost giving up nothing for the US government because it takes multiple years for a company to get to the stage where it generates $1 million in profit. And those are the companies that are creating these quality jobs. And I hope we get a chance to talk about quality jobs because it's not just about entrepreneurs, it's about the workers at those companies too.
Yeah, and what's really notable is once a company achieves that $1 million mark, it's a lot easier to get to 10 million. Not, I mean, there's nothing
Exactly.
easy about it, but once
Yeah.
you've achieved that really large milestone, the path to greater revenue is it's clearer. So, all right,
Exactly.
so I've got a question for you here. Given your experience in technology investment, how do you propose balancing innovation and national security concerns, particularly in areas like artificial intelligence, defense, and cybersecurity?
Ooh, those are three big ones to tackle all in one question.
Do
So
your
let's start.
best. Just kind of knock them off the top if you can, because
Yeah,
I think that these are issues that are really front and center right now, especially AI and what the Biden administration just put into effect.
absolutely. Well, let me jump in on that. So first of all, I want to compliment the Biden administration for coming out with, I would call it sort of a pre-regulatory set of ideas just last week, or maybe it was even earlier this week. And basically, the idea there is if any companies create a new LLM, a new model that's based on all this data and all these algorithms that are coming together in, say, GPT-4 or into the future that use more energy than the current systems are using, then they need to register with the federal government. They need to let them know that this model has been created, etc. It's a start. I'll give them credit that it's a start and it's a very well thought through start. However, we know a much better way to regulate AI and its risks. And so you have to go back to the 1940s and 1950s. After nuclear power was discovered and the two nuclear bombs were dropped on Japan, we knew that there was this new genie that had come out of the bottle that we actually had to figure out a way to regulate this, to keep it contained. And it's done a great job. There have been no more nuclear explosions since 1945. And the reason why is that we created a Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Now, that was created 12 years later in 1957, actually. And it's a multiple state, multinational set of organizations that came out of that. We don't have 12 years with AI. We need to do this much more rapidly. But we can leverage what we learned back between 1945 and 1957 to put in place something similar now. And basically, it boils down to this: there needs to be liability for what your AI does. And if companies have liability, like for example, just to give an example, I'm not saying this would be the exact policy, but if your AI results in a person being killed, you would immediately have to pay $10 million fine to the government and $10 million to the family of that individual. Now, I picked $10 million because it's a big number. and because companies will pay attention to it. And if there could be a catastrophic event where 1,000 people might be killed, then companies will really pay attention to it. Companies pay attention to dollars and cents like this. And the nuclear regulatory framework that was established in 1957 also had some type of arrangements kind of like this that said a multiple billions of dollars arrangement if there were nuclear power plants that melted down. There's even a fund to compensate victims. Honestly, it was not perfectly done, but it gives a framework that's based on liability. So that's the actual law we need right away to make AI no longer kind of a everybody can do everything and who knows what the risks are going to be. No, companies will pay attention if there's a monetary penalty for these risks. Now, and that won't actually stop innovation. That'll actually help them quantify what risks are acceptable. Like, for example, the other day, I saw, should AI be able to shoot people from a drone? No, there's no way that we should allow drones to be shooting people. That is clearly not a good idea. There should be liability associated with that. In fact, that is possibly even an area where I would make that illegal. Anyway, I'm a little bit off on a tangent here, but I want you to understand there is a way to solve this if you understand the issue well, as I believe I do.
You clearly understand the issue well, and my perspective, as it relates to the U.S. government and AI and or drones attacking other people, we have attorneys in the military that sit at the same desk in a chair beside the pilot of those drones in the AI, saying yes or no, you can strike the target.
Right, you have legal authority, you don't have legal authority. Exactly.
Not every country in the world takes that approach.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so
we didn't touch cybersecurity there, but I will say just one little quick thing on that right now, too much of our military budget, and this is from the military advisors that I talk to, too much of our military budget is still being spent on kind of old world ways of thinking about how war is going to be conducted. We need to put more of our dollars towards protecting ourselves from cybersecurity threats, to invest also in new technologies. We need to make it easier in the contracting world for smaller startup companies to win those contracts with the government when they have innovative new technologies. And I do believe the military is putting pretty significant effort in this area, but there's still a lot of gunk in the gears to allow things to move more rapidly. And that's one of the things that I would quickly move to accelerate by promoting more people who are in the military already to decision making and key positions where we can actually accelerate the use of innovative technologies safely.
Well, to that note, as a sidebar, I've been approached a couple of times, and most recently, by the Office of Strategic Capital for the U.S. government, and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and the U.S. government, they are moving rapidly to deploy more capital into these areas so that smaller businesses that are funded by VC dollars will have opportunities to earn some of these prime contracts.
Absolutely. I would give a +1 on Lloyd Austin's leadership, and that, I have also been approached for a number of those opportunities where they are reaching out, they are partnering with venture capitalists and the private sector to try to get, I'd say, fresh thinking in there. And we need to clear the way and accelerate and invest in those programs even more.
Yeah, and to any VCs who are listening, whether you're an emerging manager or a large, 100 million or 1 billion AUM company, they also have recently announced an SBIC and SBIR initiative to match funding for companies that are investing in defense to leverage your AUM for a very, very low interest rate additional capital into your fund that can be deployed. So it's worth taking a look at.
Absolutely.
So let me ask you a question of, I read recently Chris Miller's book, Chip War.
Okay.
And it speaks about manufacturing, supply chain, and skilled labor for an industry that enables other industries to make incredible advancements. So the global supply chain for semiconductors it has faced notable disruptions recently. We saw it during COVID.
Yeah.
And geopolitical tensions with China during the pandemic, it impacted American manufacturers. How would you work toward establishing either semiconductor manufacturing independence, which I think is going to be a hard one to do, or securing reliable access to these critical components for national interests?
Well, this is another place where I want to give a compliment to the Biden administration and what was accomplished recently with the CHIPS Act. So, when the CHIPS Act passed, it actually includes significant funding for building up that infrastructure in the United States. And the last chart that I saw from Stephen Ratner, actually says that we now have 200,000 new chip-related jobs already. And these are building factories in the southern United States and also the Midwest United States, sometimes in partnership with companies like Intel. So there is funding that is being deployed right now to try to build up that capacity. So I would say great job getting that started. Now, to move more quickly on that, there need to be special public-private partnerships where we, meaning the federal government, are providing the funding and allowing private companies to make proposals for what they're going to do with that funding. So think of it almost like a VC investment. And this is partly why I think a VC might be a good person to be in this type of role. There should be, exact metrics. I would be focused on outcomes. What are the outcomes you're seeking to achieve in terms of chip production, in terms of quality jobs, in terms of how fast these factories can be spooled up and start producing? We have to think sort of, it's like a wartime mentality, like when FDR worked with a lot of business leaders back in 1941, 1942. Now, we are not at war with China. In fact, I would say we need to do a better job of making sure we don't have a Cold War with China, that we actually continue to engage with China. But we need to build up our own manufacturing base here and do it aggressively. And that doesn't mean saber rattling at China. That means factory building here at home and getting as many people trained for those jobs in those factories making chips as building the factories themselves. Because right now that they have the 200,000 jobs that are available, they are finding it's very difficult to fill those jobs. So we need to look more aggressively at how we can upskill people. And I should say, I know a lot about upskilling, have been invested in a number of companies in that area, and people can be upskilled to be part of this US-based chip revolution in less than 12 months. But we have to get enough people to know about it, apply for the jobs, get trained, get upskilled. And right now, the legislation that was passed last year does not have enough funding for upskilling people in this area. So this is another area where the law needs to be amended, or we need to have a new law that actually allocates a few $1 billion in funding to upskill people for these jobs.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that, but that's really good to know. I've just been looking at it from a much higher level perspective, but I wasn't looking.
It is a good start.
It is a really good start. But okay, so as technology becomes increasingly integral to education, how do you address the digital divide to ensure like all students in urban and rural areas have equal access to educational resources and opportunities? Perhaps part of this would be, the additional funding that you're referring to for skilling up.
Yeah, this is an area where we actually have, well, I don't want to call it an easy solution, but a relatively easy fix. So billions of dollars were allocated a couple years ago during the pandemic for improving the infrastructure at schools. And those laws were written in a way that what's been happening is they've been upgrading the air filtration system, they've been upgrading the heating system, they've been upgrading a lot of things that schools actually very much need upgraded. However, there's a little tweak that needs to be made to that law so we can also upgrade the purchase of computing devices and improving the bandwidth at schools and allowing it to be used for SaaS software purchases. So, for example, if a school can't afford a license to OpenAI to enable it to be used by all of its students, we need to make sure that this infrastructure funding isn't just used to upgrade kind of the old infrastructure, the heating, the ducts, et cetera, which do need upgrading, but also the new infrastructure, the technology infrastructure. And at the last I saw, the school districts had only spent about 25% of that funding, and they're having difficulty figuring out what to spend the rest of it on. They should spend the rest of it on eliminating the digital divide, not just helping upgrade their school district facilities, upgrading the students at home, because schools are not just inside the building anymore. Schools are actually where the student goes home at night and is doing their reading and is doing their homework and is engaging their parents. Schools are now more virtual than they ever have been in the past. One of my companies is a company called Learn Platform. Learn was studying this digital divide during the pandemic, and it's pretty serious. There's about 30 to 40% of students that don't have Wi-Fi at home. They don't have high-speed broadband at home. They oftentimes don't even have a computer at home, although that's getting better in the last few years, but still not close to 99% penetration. And we need to enable schools to make those purchases, not just in their buildings, but in the homes of the students that come to their buildings.
All right, thank you. That's well said. Let me ask you about TikTok. It's a sensitive subject right now. A lot of us in VC are speaking about it, probably more so than the general public. I think maybe because we take a deeper look at things. But TikTok is owned by ByteDance, which is Chinese, and it is perceived by many as a national security threat. And the platform is actively elevating content and propaganda to its users that distorts American values while, from my perspective, promoting fear, hate, and instability in times when there's a lot of geopolitical tension going on in the world right now that we don't have to get into today. But a lot of that's happening, and if you're peeling back the layers and looking at it, it seems pretty apparent that that's exactly what's happening. Representative Mike Gallagher is chairman of the Select Committee on China. How do you propose working with him and other people in government to regulate and ensure the responsible use of algorithms and user data in social media and other technology platforms that are owned by our adversaries?
Yeah, I think it even goes beyond TikTok, and I would even include other social media platforms in this problem. There's sort of two problems in there. One is the heavy use of social media, especially TikTok, by people who are under the age of 18. And there was that recent report just a week or two ago about Facebook and how its platform was actually targeting younger users with a number of different ways. That needs to end. We do know at this point it's very similar to what we knew about smoking in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and it took so long for our society to adapt to this. We now know for sure that social media is bad for our children and that it needs to be restricted and not made available to children without an adult approval, without an adult supervision. And this kind of goes back to the liability thing that I was talking about earlier. So, there needs to be clear liability for platforms that know that kids are using their platform, know that they're using it too much, know that it's causing this illness, this mental illness in students. So that's sort of the one thing, that we know this and we should be regulating it like cigarettes because of its ill effects on student health. Secondly, you're talking about TikTok and China. I was in China not too many years ago. I have a friend who works for the New York Times who was in China, went to visit him, and saw how many of the US's applications were not allowed to be used in China. They have a very important and big firewall there that prevents all information about freedom, all information about news that's negative to China in any way from getting into their borders. Now, in the US, we are more of a free speech society. In fact, free speech is a very important principle of mine and in this country. However, when it's a foreign adversary who is actually polluting the minds of our children, it's clear that much more regulation is needed and rapidly. So you were talking about how I work with Congress on this. We need to not talk about it anymore. We need to regulate it right now.
Okay, so go to work, make it happen. No more talking about it. This is it. We're going to implement it now.
Exactly.
Full stop.
Exactly.
All right. That's a good, strong stance. Artificial intelligence, it is transforming industries. We all know it. And AI is nothing new. It's been around for a while. But the LLMs that we're seeing now and AI as a whole and a move towards AGI is happening. It's real. Their advances have have come our way at a quantum speed, if you will, right? And the advances that we're seeing just over a period of months are quite surprising. So, how would you approach workforce development to ensure that Americans are equipped with the skills needed for jobs in an AI-driven economy?
All right, so I really do want to talk a lot about AI, but I'm going to broaden it a little bit. So one of the companies that we invested in is a company called Climb Credit, and Climb works to provide loans for people who are going to boot camps for upskilling. They work with almost 300 of the best upskilling providers around the country. 60 of them are colleges and universities, but a number of them are organizations like Galvanize, General Assembly, App Academy, Stream, etc. And these are organizations that you might not have heard of, but they're educating, sometimes thousands of people in less than 12 months on skills like computer science, cybersecurity, AI, mixed blue collar. Last time I visited a construction site, I asked to look, like, let me see what equipment you're actually using. The equipment that they're using is highly digitized. It requires great technical sophistication. It's more complicated than using a computer, and it looks a lot like a computer because it has chips in it, and so there are these multiple industries that are all being digitized simultaneously, including manufacturing, construction, any industry. Every company is becoming digitized to a certain degree right now, and those jobs can be learned in less than 12 months. And in fact, since we've helped more than 25,000 students go to these programs across these 300 programs through Climb Credit, we can actually see the graduation rates, how much people make as a salary when they get past the program. So a lot of people would come in making $30,000 or less, usually in hourly jobs. And then by the time they leave these programs, they're making $60,000 or more. So their salary almost doubles within 1 year. And I would say the issue right now is that the industry as a whole is about 100,000 people per year. It's not big enough. We need to grow that industry. And that industry can be grown with a new apprenticeship law that allows more people to become apprentices in the digital trades, I'll call them, and also so that more colleges and universities and these upskilling programs can rapidly grow their enrollments. It's great that Climb is providing these loans, and Climb does that in partnership with Goldman Sachs, but we provide almost $200 billion in loans every year for people to attend traditional colleges. If just a small amount of that money was made available for apprenticeships and for these upskilling programs, we could upskill a lot more people a lot more rapidly. And that's another law that would need to be changed, is to enable these programs to not just be used by the 60 most innovative colleges in America, but by thousands of colleges in America.
Okay, so that's a very interesting angle. I like the thought process on that, and it's very interesting to hear how that portfolio company is working with a company like Goldman Sachs and others to provide the tools and the credit needed to achieve that target of
Absolutely,
an upskill.
absolutely. They've been a big inspiration to me. That it's one of our, all of our children, and when you're a venture investor, are your favorite children. But this one is particularly interesting because of the fact that they provide capital to so many of the upskilling programs in America, both at colleges and then independent of colleges, and in 12 different industry sectors, like I was talking about before. So I'm inspired that we can take what's happened at those 300 programs and upscale it to thousands of programs all across the country and to see similar results.
Well, aside from upskilling people who we need to be familiar with the new, maybe you could call it the new blue collar, there are also a number of people who do not require upskilling, who are highly educated, but maybe are not American citizens or are working towards citizenship, and they work at these different companies, the big ones, and are looking to work for the smaller ones as well. So let me ask you, when balancing innovation with responsible regulation, it is crucial. It needs to be done. How do you propose fostering a regulatory environment that encourages technological advancements and liberal use of H-1B visas for qualified foreign workers, while really safeguarding against potential risks that we see around corporate espionage from foreigners.
Yeah, I see this as a question about immigration in general.
Okay.
And so there are multiple things I want to say here. The first is that the three pillars of my presidential campaign, one is conscious capitalism, which we talked about at the beginning, moving to B corporations and corporations with purpose and mission. The second pillar is building a people first talent economy, and most of that is focused on upskilling people in America for these digital blue collar jobs that we were just talking about. But another big part of it is welcoming the talent that already wants to come here. So there are so many people who are coming to American colleges and universities and upskilling programs who want to become Americans. We should not just double the H-1B visa program. We should 10x that program. That program usually runs out of the spots within a month of it being opened every year. So we know there's at least 10x the capacity there of people who want to be Americans, want to get a green card, want to get pushed along to the next level and become citizens over time. And they come to our colleges. They want to become Americans. In fact, first and second generation immigrants that are friends of mine are some of the most American people I know. They know the ideals. They know the Constitution. They have chosen to move their whole family over here, oftentimes because they believe in America. They believe we're that shining lighthouse on a hill that actually is their beacon of hope for them and for many more people. Now, all that said, I think the last survey I saw said that 1 billion people from all over the globe want to come to America. We cannot let everyone in, but we should definitely let the best and brightest into our country who believe in our ideals, who go to our colleges and universities, and who work at our companies. And we're overdue in adopting an immigration system that's more like Canada or Australia, that's based on points, and you get more points for actually working here, paying taxes, getting a college degree here, speaking English. There are multiple different things that go into it. But we should have a talent focused immigration approach and welcome many more of these new Americans who believe in our ideals and want to make our country stronger.
Yeah, it might be interesting to have a GitHub contribution space that looks at each individual on the tech side contribution and then just escalate them up based on how many contributes they make.
Number contributes to GitHub. I like that.
Can you
Yeah,
imagine?
we can have a point system based on that. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It'll work for some, certainly not for all.
Yeah.
All right, so I want to ask you a question on
Bring on the hard stuff. This is easy so far.
this. So I got a question for you on foreign policy because I think that's something that's important. It's one of the last questions I have for you. But given your background in technology and venture capital,
Yeah.
how do you plan to integrate technological innovation into foreign policy while fostering international technology collaboration and utilizing economic diplomacy to strengthen America's global position? I mean, we really have to make sure that America is first, and I know, without a doubt, that's where you're at.
I definitely am focused on making America as strong and as technologically forward as possible. That's what my campaign is based upon. Now, your question is actually almost like a dissertation thesis in a question. That's a really great question. And so the first thing I would say is I kind of look back on my values. So I am a Quaker by background. I wasn't actually born Quaker, but over time I have chosen to become a Quaker in terms of my values. And many people probably don't know that much about Quakers out there. There are only 300,000 Quakers in America. But Quakers were some of the first people in America to advocate for the abolition of slavery. We also conducted the first gay marriage in 1971. Quakers believe that there is part of God in everyone, and we should do whatever we can to try to ensure peace and try to reduce the loss of life around the globe. And so that makes me someone who believes we should stop all this working together with authoritarian governments that are actually harming and killing their own people. We should have a focus on working with democracies around the world and countries that are focused on deploying human rights and democracy and free markets for their people to help bring their own people along. So my focus would be on completely changing the realpolitik of what's been organizing our foreign policy for the last 50 years. Henry Kissinger just died the other day. He was kind of I would say, the dean of realpolitik and partnering with different countries to create a balance of power. I understand how that works. And what that results in is a diminished American reputation around the world. If we want to increase our reputation around the world, we should work with democracies. We should grade countries on how well they're implementing human rights, both civil human rights, civil rights, and also economic rights. Are they actually giving their people the ability to create businesses? Are they helping upskill their people? Do they have enough schools to educate their people in how science works and how innovation works? So the goal is not to be the world's policeman. The goal is to be a shining light of what a good democracy with a free people can accomplish. And we should help more countries move in that direction.
That's admirable. So let me ask you a final question here.
Sure.
And this is a softball question for you, Jason. What comes to mind when you think of going fast? And it can be anything.
When I think of going fast, I think of rockets, because rockets go really fast.
Okay, that's a good one. Well, I think that will do it for us, Jason. Thank you for driving in the fast lane with us. It was really fun. And everybody, this is Jason Palmer, 2024 Democratic presidential candidate. Thank you, Jason. It's been nice speaking with you today.
It's been wonderful speaking with you too, Ryan. I really appreciate it.
That's my pleasure. Until next time, I'm your host, Ryan Else, and this is the Venture Capital Fast Lane.